Hey everyone, it is time for another chapter of Framed, and we are on chapter 22 today. It's called Extra Credit Algebra. I couldn't believe that Serena Miller and Earl Jackson could possibly be involved in the theft of Woman with a Parasol. Or maybe I just didn't want to believe it. Miller was a family friend, and Jackson was so nice and unassuming, he insisted I call him by his first name. But I also couldn't ignore the fact that both were at Art Fest in Budapest at the same time as Pavel Novak. It could just be a coincidence, offered Margaret. Remember when you were first teaching me about toast? You warned me that just because something is unexpected doesn't mean it's suspicious. Yes, but it's the closest we've come to connecting Novak with anyone at the museum, I said. Even worse, they were both directly involved with updating the security software. You couldn't pick anyone in a better position to orchestrate the whole burglary. I sat down in my chair and slumped. I haven't met either one of them, so I don't know what they're like, she said. But there were 3 other people from the museum at that convention. What about them? These were the names and titles listed on the itinerary. Michael Jennings, PhD, curator. Kendra May, conservator. Ryan Thigpen, project manager. Serena Miller, director of security. Earl Jackson, security manager. We know it's not Jennings because he moved to New York over a year ago to work at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, I said. What about the other 2? Margaret asked. If Kendra May is a conservator, then she probably works with your mom. You're right, I said. Let's find out. We headed upstairs and found Mom in the front yard painting a picture of the house. It's a tradition she's done of every home we've lived in. Wow, Margaret said, admiring it. That's beautiful, Mrs. B. Mom smiled. Thanks. It may not be nice enough for the National Gallery, but we should be able to find a spot for it somewhere in the house. Don't let her modesty fool you, I said. She'd sold paintings in some really nice galleries. And don't let sales fool you, she responded. Van Gogh only sold 2 paintings in his entire life. We could talk for hours about the difference between what's true art and what sells, but I don't think that's why you came up here. You look like you have a question. 2, actually, I said. Do you know a project manager named Ryan Thigpen? She thought about it for a moment. The name's familiar, but I don't know him. I think he oversees modern art installations in the East Building. What about Kendra May? Of course, said Mom. Kendra's extremely talented. She specializes in the Impressionists and the Post-Impressionists, like I do. She did an amazing job repairing a Degas that had been damaged in storage. So if her specialty is the Impressionists, then she'd be a fan of Monet, right? Reasoned Margaret. Who isn't a fan of Monet? Answered Mom. But sure. In fact, I think she did some academic research about him for her PhD. So far, so good. What's she like as a person? I asked. Is she nice? Mom laughed a little as she considered this. She's not mean, but she's also not too friendly. She likes to do her own thing, and she really gets upset if anyone moves her lunch in the break room refrigerator. Margaret and I shared a look. I already liked her much more as a candidate than Serena and Earl. Why do you ask? Mom wanted to know. It's part of what I'm looking into for Agent Rivers, I said. It turns out she was at a convention in Hungary at the same time as the man who painted the forgery of Woman with a Parasol. And you think she might be involved? Asked Mom. I shrugged. Maybe. Well, then I have bad news, she said. Kendra had a baby a few days before the burglary, a boy named Vincent. Suddenly, Kendra May seemed much less likely to be the one we were looking for. I can't imagine anyone planning a major museum heist to coincide with giving birth. It would just make everything too unpredictable. Margaret and I grabbed some apples from the kitchen and headed back to the basement. Here's what I'm thinking, Margaret said as we got back to work. You're not going to meet someone and instantly hatch a plan to rob the National Gallery. You'd want to meet at least another time or 2. That's true, I said. So let's go back to all the records and see who went back to Europe. This time we didn't consider only convention and trade show trips. We looked at all travel involving any of our potential candidates. Here's one for Ryan Thigpen, said Margaret. Stockholm, Sweden, in January of this year. That sounds unbearably cold, I replied. Anything for Kendra May? Nope, she said. I'm thinking that and the baby give her a pretty good alibi. I was scanning through the papers when I came across a trip to Berlin by Earl Jackson. 4 days meeting with consultants, I said, reading off the description on the trip. Oh no, said Margaret. What is it? 2 trips by Serena Miller, she said, looking up at me. One last September, and one just a few weeks before we saw Novak in the museum. Where to? I asked. The first one to Paris, and the second, Prague. Toast is about the accumulation of many little details. And for the moment at least, those details weren't looking too good for Serena. I was bummed, so Margaret reminded me that we had an entirely different lead to follow. You never know how it might all shake out, she said. Let's see if the auctions show us anything interesting. Because his insurance company worked with all the prestigious auction houses, Oliver Hobbs had been able to access complete bidding records for major auctions involving the big names of Impressionism. Normally, the public only finds out who winds up with the painting, but this gave us a much bigger picture of who was interested in the paintings the burglar targeted. We hoped we could find a mastermind hidden among the bidders. Each auction is printed on a separate piece of paper, I said to Margaret, so let's line them up in chronological order. Just like we'd done with the names of the conventions, we taped the results of each auction on the wall. This way we could walk along the evidence and look at the big picture, instead of only bit by bit on a computer screen. I want to put pictures of the paintings up too, said Margaret. That'll help me keep track of them in my brain. Good idea, I said. Margaret got the images off the web and printed thumbnail copies of each. There, she said, as she taped the last one up. It's like Gallery 85 has come to the underground. At first, it was hard to look past anything but the massive sums of money paid out at the auctions. One of Monet's water lily paintings sold for $47 million to a private collector, while a museum paid $32 million for a portrait by Renoir. We're talking mad, crazy money, said Margaret. And we think one of these people may be the mastermind? Not one of the winners, I said. Someone who can pay $47 million for a painting doesn't need to steal one. We're looking for one of the losers. Someone who keeps trying to get one, but gets outbid. So if you can't beat 'em, cheat 'em, she said. You got it. Basically, there were 4 different types of bidders. Institutions such as museums, looking to add the paintings to their collections. Monetary funds and banks buying them as financial investments. Private collectors, and what were called anonymous entities. Why be an anonymous entity? Asked Margaret. A lot of reasons, I guess. Maybe you don't want anyone to know how much money you have. Maybe you don't want the art world to know which artists you're interested in. Or maybe you're a criminal who wants to keep his identity hidden, she finished. Yeah, I agreed. Maybe that. We decided to focus on the anonymous bids. In order to stay anonymous, you have to hire a representative to do the actual bidding and communicating with the auction house, I explained to Margaret. So what you do is give your representative a limit, say $5 million, and the representative stays in the bidding until the price goes over that limit. That's why so many of these end on nice round numbers, she said, pointing at one of the bid sheets. This bidder stopped at $10 million, and this one stopped at $15 million. Those must have been the limits their client gave them. Exactly, I said. So why did this one stop at $12,457,493, she asked, pointing at a bid for a Monet. I looked at it for a moment, and I said, I have no idea. She looked at an auction 6 months later. Here's the same representative, American Art and Antique Acquisitions, trying to get another painting, also a Monet. The final bid is $12,629,127. Those are such random numbers, I said, completely baffled. We looked through all the auctions and found 9 instances when American Art and Antique Acquisitions tried to purchase a painting. Each time the painting was either a Monet or a Renoir, and each time the bidding stopped at a seemingly random number. We wrote the bids on a separate sheet of paper and hung it on the wall too. Then we just sat there and stared at it, and stared, and stared, as if the answer might jump out at us. Arrgh, Margaret said, rubbing her temples. It's like I'm doing extra credit algebra homework. Maybe that's it, I said. Maybe it's algebra. What type of algebra? I got on the computer to search for something. Here it is. Write this down. Amount to equals amount from times rate from over rate to. I looked up and she was giving me a total stink eye. I speak English, not equations, she said. Why don't you just copy down what you see on the screen and then explain what the heck you're talking about? Exchange rates. I dealt with them all the time when I lived in Europe. We'd have to figure out how many dollars are in a euro, or if we went to London, we'd have to convert euros into pounds. Maybe these actually are nice round numbers, I said, pointing at the list. Just not in dollars. I tried doing the math on paper until Margaret reminded me the computer would be quicker. I started entering numbers into the equations, and then I compared those amounts with currency rates from the days of each auction. It was complicated, but when I was done, it couldn't have been more basic. Each number equaled the exact same amount. 50 million leu, I said. 50 million what? She asked, confused. Leu. It's a type of money. Oh, she said. Which country uses the leu? That's when I grinned. Romania. That's the end of chapter 22. See you next time.